And where we want to start this conversation, because we are recording it a day later than we'd originally intended, let's start with what the banks were predicting prior to the Bank of Canada announcement yesterday. And Matt, I'm going to throw it over to you. Why don't you take us away there and we'll jump in from there.
Yeah, so we had 4 out of the 5 banks expecting a cut. So TD, CIBC, BMO, and Scotia all said that we were going to get a cut. RBC, for some reason, was on the lone hold. They stated that it was going to be a close call, soft data, but not worse than the BOC expected. And they prefer physical policy over rate cuts, which I tend to agree with a little bit. I won't get into the deep on that one. And then we look at BMO. BMO is the most aggressive out of all of the banks, which were predicting 2% by 2026. And I think a lot of the banks after the cut yesterday have come out and they've readjusted where they're thinking with cuts. And I think Nicole can speak to it, but maybe a lot of these banks are starting to think maybe 2% is the intended target over the next couple quarters.
Well, it's definitely interesting. And I've had a couple conversations with some economists over the last couple of days, even since last week. And outside of what we're seeing here in these stats, that is something I'm hearing quite a bit, where those predictions are a little bit more aggressive than what we're seeing right here. So I don't think that 2% is unheard of based on some of the conversations I'm having. I'm probably more in line with the more conservative approach, just based on the information we have as of today. But depending on how things go, I don't think it's too far-fetched based on some of those conversations, for sure.
I think if anything, what we've learned from this year and in general is it is better to be a little bit more conservative on what we think these guys are going to do, because it does change so much. Matt, we've got that prediction slide, which is one of my favorites as we look at it, because I get to see the rates, I get to see the percentages on when they think it's going to happen. And honestly, week to week and month to month, we've seen drastic changes there on what their expectations were for where we'd be rate-wise by the end of the year. And again, it fluctuates now where we were 2 days prior to this announcement. So it's interesting to see. And sorry, go ahead, Nicole.
No, sorry, I was just going to say, and I think you nailed it there. The reality is that we're not sure. We do have to go, not necessarily day by day, but it's one of those things where we can have a prediction as of today and we can think what we think, and something else can change tomorrow. Up until a couple of weeks ago, the numbers, and I'm sure you guys have the exact stats, but the predictions for what happened yesterday was quite different. The scales weren't tipped that far in favor of a rate cut out until pretty much, I guess, we saw the unemployment rates come out. Those numbers, that was pretty much, I think, from what I'm seeing, what shifted the scales to pretty much a guaranteed drop yesterday.
And so, Matt, we talk about that a lot. It's inflation that they're trying to manage, but there's a lot of different metrics and reports that they're watching to decide on, should we do it? Do we need to step in? Do we not need to? What do you think changed this time around that ultimately led to us getting a cut?
I think they're forecasting that the inflation in their view is going to come down, and they're trying to get ahead of it now because the jobs market is weakening. I think ultimately the biggest thing for the cut is that the government of Canada is going to come out with a bazooka shortly, and to borrow all that money, they're going to need cheaper rates. But I think the Bank of Canada was also forward looking and saying, hey, we think that inflation is going to come down. That's hard to believe when a federal deficit might come in over $100 billion. That's what they're forecasting. And maybe they're worried about the job market. Their number one thing should be focused on inflation. When you drop interest rates during an inflationary period, the people that benefit the most from that, and we'll look later on in these slides, are people that own assets. Let's face it. And people that don't own anything can drive the cost of their food, the cost of things that they need. It could drive those prices up. So I think it's a very delicate thing to make sure that they get this right, because you can't have inflation accelerating to the upside and dropping interest rates, because it's going to affect a large portion of the population negatively.
And I think also, too, we're coming off of that up and down where a lot of people think that government didn't get things right over the past few years, right? So I think there's that there as well.
There's a massive amount of debt, not only at the government level, but even the household level that needs to be refinanced here. And I think around 60% of all mortgages need to be refinanced over the next year and a half. So they're looking into that too, I think.